What we're going to do now is take another 15-minute break until we get an author here, and we'll also try to get some more committee members here as well, so we can start to act on some of these bills. Huh?
To motivate the upgrades and changes in practice required, as the portion of the costs for incentive is available is substantial. This results in deferred projects and stranded savings. Let me put that in English. The fact is our energy standards are so strong that going above and beyond that costs more money than getting old buildings to comply with code. Now, there is some logic to only rewarding those buildings that are above and beyond, but the fact is these older buildings are mostly legal non-conforming, meaning they don't conform to current code, but there's nothing legally requiring those folks to change. And so this bill would allow IOUs to provide incentives for improvements from existing conditions, including savings achieved by process changes and maintenance. Without authorizing this flexibility, it's not clear we can achieve the governor's goal for doubling building efficiency by 2030.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Valerie Terrell of Lajos with PG&E. We do support and are the sponsor of this measure and view this as removing a key policy and market barrier to achieving deep savings, also called stranded savings, where not only will the incentives be offered to customers, sometimes we call those rebates, to customers from their existing conditions. We're going to use those smart meters and measure from, that's what we mean by measuring from existing conditions. As our policy was set to incentivize IOUs to operate in the above Title 24 space, that was not necessarily a bad thing. But as the author has stated, we have become so aggressive in our codes, which is fine. It's leaving all of these stranded savings on the table. So we're saying let's remove that market barrier. Let's change the policy to get to deeper savings in our existing buildings. And with that, I would ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tamara Rasbear on behalf of the Semper Utilities, San Diego Gas and Electric, and the Southern California Gas Company, also in support of this bill. We talked earlier this morning or today about energy efficiency goals and targets, and we really can't achieve those goals and targets set out before us by the legislature and the governor without removing the barriers to existing conditions. You will see the impact of a policy like this on improving conditions in low income, where the housing stock is quite old, and we are not able to really penetrate those savings because of the barriers on existing codes. So with that, I ask for your aye vote. Thank you.
For all the speakers, after you clear the space for the next speaker, appreciate that very much. Yes, sir.
Mike Monaghan on behalf of the California State Association of Electrical Workers and the Coalition of California Utility Employees, the California State Pipe Trades Council, and the Western States Council of Sheet Metal Workers. We are in support of Mr. Williams' bill.
Nick Pappas with Southern California Edison. Echo the comments of the previous speakers. We think this is a really important process change to allow us to reach much deeper into the existing building stock for energy efficiency upgrades, and ask for your aye vote. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Victoria Rome with the Natural Resources Defense Council in support. Thank you.
Corey Bullis on behalf of Environmental Defense Fund, also in support.
Sylvia Solis on behalf of the City of Santa Monica. We support this bill and believe it aligns with our own energy efficiency goals down at the city. We ask for your support.
Anyone else in support? Do we have anyone in opposition to the bill? Anyone else in opposition come forward?
Mr. Chair and members, Erin Niemela representing the Efficiency Council. As you've heard earlier today, they're a trade organization representing more than 70 companies who do energy efficiency products and services. We actually have an oppose unless amended position on this bill. And first, I just want to say how much we appreciate this author's leadership on issues relating to energy efficiency. He's actually done a tremendous amount for the industry. We also appreciate him bringing this issue forward. There's a tremendous amount of benefit in having this discussion. So what this bill does, as you know, is it changes the baseline for energy efficiency, and it allows savings that would actually bring buildings up to code be counted as energy efficiency, including for purposes of our ratepayer programs. Our own members would do a lot of that work, and so we find ourselves in a difficult position on this bill. However, our oppose unless amended position is predicated on the notion that we cannot change the baseline in California, we should not, to allow buildings to be brought up to existing code for energy efficiency without also providing some measure of accountability. So the flexibility is fine as long as it is combined with accountability. And we believe that accountability has to occur in the form of actually setting a standard for energy efficiency that the state needs to meet. And so we would propose that this bill be connected to a standard like that, so that as we change the baseline, as we reach deep to get buildings up to where they should be and provide ratepayer funds for that, we are also doing what we have always done and what is the intention of these programs, and that is helping California aspire to more. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments?
I just, in my closing, would address the questions by the Energy Efficiency Council. I do think that a macro target is a good idea, but I know senators probably this is one of your pet peeves too, is to have folks oppose your bill based on what is not in your bill, and instead of what is in your bill. We believe that change the baseline for essentially what programs IOUs and POUs can offer their ratepayers is connected but different than that macro target. A macro target for the state is something I support. I just don't want to have my bill double jointed with that target. It is a bill that I supported in my committee and have asked be part of the assembly package, and it's a bill I hope you will pass, but it's not one that I am agreeing to double join with mine.
Very good, thank you, and we'll move your bill as soon as we have a quorum. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Take up AB 1023.
Thank you, Senator. Members, AB 1023 is one of several efforts to reform the CPUC and address the various issues relating to accountability and transparency. Specifically, AB 1023 deals with ex parte communication summary logs and sets up a weekly communications log that summarizes oral and written ex parte communications and rate setting and adjudicated proceedings after the release of emails between the CPUC and entities that it regulates, which revealed a pattern of informal and private contacts by CPUC members and regulated entities. AB 1023 simply codifies the provisions of existing CPUC policy and includes communications that occur between high-level CPUC personnel and expands the reporting to include quasi-legislative proceedings, advice letters, and scoping memos. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Very well. Do we have testimony in support? Any opposition to the bill? Any questions or comments from the committee? Okay. I just wanted to hear from the author if you're accepting the amendments that are proposed from the committee.
I appreciate working with the committee and absolutely do accept amendments.
Wonderful. And I just want to praise your approach. I think it's much overdue that we work on this. There's a body of information already in our state that suggests that we need to do something to address this, and I want to applaud you taking on this issue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for your help and cooperation.
And if you have any closing comments,
respectfully ask for your aye vote.
thank you. We'll call for a motion as soon as we have a quorum. Hopefully that will be soon. We have our final presenter.
Thank you.
Assemblymember Ting, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Here to present AB 1110. I'd like to start off by accepting the committee's amendments referenced on page 6 and 7 of the analysis. However, I do want to make sure to note that we definitely urge the California Energy Commission to move immediately as soon as possible on the preceding issue. California has long been an environmental energy leader. We are at the cusp of really setting the pace in clean and green energy. Also by having a 33% RPS goal, and with the governor moving us and pushing us to 50%, and I know that many of those deliberations have been happening in this committee. I believe this bill 1110 is a great step in that direction. Simply put, AB 1110 ensures that the energy that is claimed to be green is actually green. So it's no more than the labeling issue that you might find on a can of soda or on any food product that you have. We believe by having accurate green labeling for our energy that consumers will be able to make educated purchases, and in fact in some instances they'll be willing to pay for that green energy. We think by really creating that consumer incentive is a huge move in that right direction. I have here two witnesses, Matt Friedman from Turn, and I don't see Matt Friedman from Turn.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Assemblymember Ting. I'm Matt Friedman on behalf of the Utility Reform Network. We're here in support of AB 1110. We all know that California has ambitious goals for the reduction of greenhouse gases. And back at the beginning of the process of electric deregulation, when the commission, when the legislature, created retail competition and allowed customers to have meaningful choices, the legislature authorized the creation of a power content label, which was designed to allow for a consistent format for disclosing renewable energy that was procured by each utility or direct access supplier, all of the publicly owned utilities. The idea was that consumers needed accurate and consistent information to be able to make meaningful choices, and that this information would be hard to come by and might not be reliable if it wasn't backed by a consistent state standard, at least for the methodology of reporting. Consumers need this information because this issue is extraordinarily complicated. And when retailers, utilities of any type are making representations about where they get their power, there needs to be confidence from the consumer perspective that what's being said is accurate. Effectively, the power content label serves as a nutrition label of sorts. And unfortunately, when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions, there is no consistent standard currently for disclosing greenhouse gas emissions associated with electric supply portfolios. We are literally in the Wild West, where every retailer can make up their own methodology or standard. This is really not an acceptable approach going forward. From our perspective, California needs to do better and certainly can do better. AB 1110 would add to the existing power content label an additional field of information that would provide consumers with accurate, consistent information about the greenhouse gas emissions that are associated with the electricity being procured to serve them. It would assign this function to the Energy Commission, which already produces the power content label. And it ensures that the greenhouse gas emissions that are reported are based on the actual power plants and resources that are used to serve the customers. The goal here is to align this standard with the approach that is used for reporting greenhouse gas emissions to the Air Resources Board, which administers the state's cap and trade program. We want to make sure that there's no disconnect where you have different methodologies being used that effectively result in retailers disclosing greenhouse gas emissions that are different from the greenhouse gas emissions that are being disclosed to the Air Resources Board for the same power plants that are serving. We want an honest accounting, and we want to make sure that there's no opportunity to use tradable credits or planting trees in Brazil or any number of different sort of offset measures to try to adjust the actual numbers that are reported. We want to make sure that the power plants used to serve the customers are the ones that are the basis for the greenhouse gas numbers. Turn believes this is an important measure to promote accountability, transparency, and that it helps us to move forward with empowering customers to make good choices. Thank you.
Mr. Friedman.
Mr. Chairman and Member Scott Witch, on behalf of the California Coalition of Utility Employees, this is a consumer protection transparency measure that we've long supported because we know that there are some actors out there in both the community choice aggregation arena and in the energy service provider arena that are going to customers and promoting themselves as being 100% renewable, when in reality they're relying predominantly on renewable energy credits and delivering system power, which is 67% fossil-based. So they go to a customer in many of your districts and suggest that if they pay a little more, a higher premium, they will get 100% renewable power, when in reality, they're not getting 100% renewable power. They're getting system power, which is 67% fossil-based. This would require truth in advertising so that we don't have any games being played. Every IOU, every municipal utility, every CCA, and every energy service provider would have to play by the same metrics, so every customer out there in California knows exactly how green their power is. We'd urge an aye vote.
Thank you. And as we clear I ask the speakers as they speak to clear the chair so we can have other speakers come forward. If there are other speakers in favor, please come forward and prepare to make your comments. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, Mitch Seaman with the California Labor Federation, also here in support of the bill. As mentioned, this closes a gap in current law that will allow consumers to make more responsible energy choices, and we urge your support.
Thank you.
Eddie Moreno on behalf of Sierra Club California in support.
Jonathan Catherine, I'm a customer of Marin Clean Energy and work in the energy field. And I believe the transparency around greenhouse gas is important. And it's something like having calories on your food and also having your ingredients. You need both. Thank you.
My name is Jim Phelps. I live in Marin, independent engineer. I wholeheartedly support the transparency that this bill brings to consumers.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Jack Tibbetts. I'm the Director of Government and Community Relations for California Clean Power, and we support this bill.
Thank you. We're hearing from the opposition now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gil Tepete with the California Municipal Utilities Association. We oppose the bill on just the the facts of process. Currently, the CEC, as it is our understanding, began a procedure to make some changes on the power content label several years back. Due to workload issues and other requirements probably imposed in part on the legislature, they slowed that process down. They re-began the process looking at either including RPS numbers to the power content label or renewable energy credit information to the power content label. As early as July 1st, CMUA, a party to that process, submitted written comments on making that happen. There is a process in the works. I understand this issue isn't included in that process. I think there's other ways to make it happen rather than putting in a statute directing the CEC to focus on this issue without clarifying whether or not they're still supposed to focus on the other two issues that they're currently going through and they're proceeding now. Bills can be complicated already. The requirements of the power content label are just once a year you put an insert to your customers with this information. It's unclear to CMUA how including you have these 5 or 6 procurement power supplies, 500 what is it, million megatons of carbon emissions equals. I don't know how that information is of any value to most customers, but okay.
Jeff Cyphers with Sonoma Clean Power. We run a community choice program in Sonoma County, and we're here to oppose unless amended. In 2014, our program exceeded the RPS. We served 36% renewable energy, cut greenhouse gases by 48% relative to PG&E's last published numbers, and saved customers $13.6 million. We also contracted to build 85 megawatts of new solar power in California. The stated goals of this bill make sense, but there's some problematic language in it. So it makes sense to have standard greenhouse gas reporting. It makes sense even to phase out Category 3 RECs. It's time that we begin that phase out, and that makes sense. The RPS recognizes that. Sonoma Clean Power has already decided voluntarily to do that, but a planning horizon is needed. Doing this instantaneously doesn't work. We have long-term procurement, as do others. 2020 would be consistent with the RPS, but some year, at least 2018 and beyond, would make sense for us. We wouldn't have stranded costs that way. The problem is that the bill's requirement for delivery to a, quote, retail customer is actually not consistent with the way a balancing authority operates and would actually introduce problems even for Category 1 power in California. If we bought Category 1 power from a facility in Southern California, a strict reading of this language would actually prevent us from having credit for that for Northern California customers because the net flow of power is south in the state. So that's a problem, and that needs to be fixed. I think that's fairly minor, and I'm hoping the bill's author will be willing to work with us on that. We do have some language that we can propose on that, but really key is to fix that element, and with that change and with a reasonable planning horizon, we could be supportive of this bill.
Thank you.
Members, my name is Beth Kelly with Marin Clean Energy. We're the first CCA to launch in the state of California. The mission of MCE is to increase the use of renewable electricity and reduce GHGs. We're looking forward to having a standardized methodology for GHG emissions accounting for our customers. We're very proud of our green procurement to date, and we are near the phase out of the use of unbundled RECs. That being said, we're here to oppose unless amend. Specifically, we have 3 requests. First, we urge the author and the committee to apply a GHG accounting standard in 2020 so that we can continue our phase out of unbundled RECs. We also would like the author and the committee to make the GHG accounting standard consistent with the RPS. And also, we would like the bill to leverage the stakeholder regulatory processes that are already underway. So without these revisions, we urge a no vote.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Mario DiBernardo with the Northern California Power Agency. We're concerned about the timing of this gut and amend bill. We have an opposed position. The power content label has been a long-standing source of confusion for the public. NCPA sponsored a bill in 2009 to clean up the power content label to provide accurate, reliable, and simple information. This was an Assemblymember Ruskin bill. 6 years later, the Energy Commission is finally completing the regulations for this bill. We ask that we wait until these regs are adopted before changing the power content label in this gut and amend manner. We are willing to assist the author in this if he is willing to develop the power content label amendments in a more thorough process. Thank you.
Very well. Do we have any other comments from the public? Anything from the committee at all? We'll go to McGuire, then Hertzberg.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and I do appreciate the opportunity to be able to comment on this, and do appreciate the author bringing this forward, because I think that we can all agree that we need to advance this in California regarding transparency. There are a few items that I'd like to be able to discuss, some potential amendments, and the reason being is it's difficult in the process in which we're moving forward now, with now just being heard in the Senate, to be able to have comment period related to some of the contracts that have already been placed. So there's a couple examples that I'd like to be able to bring forward and some background. Come from municipal power background through Northern California Power Agency. And then when I was on the Board of Supervisors, we followed Marin County by launching Sonoma Clean Power. Sonoma Clean Power is now providing electricity to the majority of Sonoma County residents.
Mr. McGuire, just real quick, is his mic on? Okay, go, please proceed. I can't tell.
And with that, the Sonoma County Board of Supervisors established some longer-term contracts under one set of rules. Same thing with Marin Clean purchase power, longer-term contracts under one set of rules. And now, with this legislation moving forward, the rules will change. And when you are in a utility business, as all of us know, you can't simply change on a dime. And what I would say is we need to be realistic in this approach. So I think that Assemblymember Ting's objective is admirable and supported, but there needs to be a glide path. And what I would like to be able to suggest, and one of the items that I brought forward to the chair, is looking at a 2018 timeframe to allow both Marin and Sonoma to let those contracts run out, and then they will then be able to purchase as the new legislation would set forth in the new language. So what I would ask is for an implementation timeline that would be delayed to 2018. Being very candid, that would allow both Marin and Sonoma to run through those contracts, and I know that there's been discussion about 2020. We heard Turn say 2017, trying to cut it right in the middle, right? Looking at 2018. Number two, I think the other item is making sure this is consistent with Senate Bill 350, which is the landmark clean energy bill, along with Senate Bill 32 that's continuing to move forward. And that is what both MCE and Sonoma Clean Power had brought forward today. And there is some proposed language. Know that we're not going to get into the specific language here today on consistency with 350, but I do think that's going to be important as that is the Senate's bill related to energy efficiency and cutting greenhouse gas emissions. But my bottom line is we need to look at a glide path. We would not require any other business to be able to get into one contract and then say the rules have changed. Now you have to dump that. You've already spent millions. We need to look at a 2018 timeframe. I would respectfully ask for that amendment.
That we incorporate a 2018 timeframe for implementation date. Yep. Okay, we'll go to the author and ask him about that in just a second. Did Senator Hertzberg want to add to that?
What I want to do too is I'd like to get Mr. Wetch's thoughts on that, and I have a couple of comments myself, if that's okay, Mr. Chairman.
Sure, absolutely.
Mr. Chairman, that's on.
Mr. Chairman and members, well, I certainly respect the senator's concern for Marin and Sonoma. I just want to be clear, the bill doesn't change any rules. It doesn't tell Coca-Cola that it's got to change its ingredients. It just tells Coca-Cola that it's got to tell the public what those ingredients are. So to the extent that they have an issue with telling the public clearly what their portfolio looks like, this shouldn't be a problem. It doesn't tell them they have to change their portfolio. It just says, if it's an apple, called an apple, and if it's an orange, called an orange. Now, some delayed operative date we wouldn't oppose. I think my clients would support 2017, but it doesn't. I want to make sure that there's no confusion that we're not telling them they have to go and procure any different power than they already have procured.
Did you want to?
So the one item, and And I think that Mr. Wetch is one of the best here in the Capitol and greatly appreciate all of his amazing advocacy. The reason why I say change the rules is, so let's say Sonoma goes and buys hydro up in the Northwest. Right now, that is counted both on, I'm going to call it the green energy side, and they get credit for that. So where the rules would change is if they go buy hydro, particularly in the peak period of our summer, July, August, September, they get credit. One, they're going to get a cheaper price for that versus buying it on the spot market, number one. And then number two, they actually would get credit for it being a renewable source. What I'm saying is that why I say the rules would change because of this is it would bring transparency. You're absolutely right. They would have to be able to buy on the spot market now, which, by the way, my own opinion, at times you're going to get dirtier fuel, potentially natural gas that you're going to have to purchase versus hydro out of the Pacific Northwest. That's a whole other issue. But that's why I'm saying a 2018 implementation, because there are contracts that have already been placed by the majority of the ratepayers in both Marin and Sonoma counties, and they need to let those contracts play out. We're going to accomplish the same thing by allowing a glide path to be able to look at these, and I'm not against it, but looking at transparency, I'm all for it, but we do need a glide path of 2 years to be able to get out of the contracts.
Senator Hertzberg?
Yeah, I just, that's a larger issue. I think the idea is smart. I just spent an hour earlier this afternoon. The reason I wasn't here, Mr. Chairman, was because I was in Assembly Utilities Committee talking about some of the very issues. And I have very same witnesses before this body talking about the notion of transparency, arguing against my direct access bill, saying there's no transparency. Now, certainly this measure by Mr. Ting is not the law. But I do think it would be smart for us as a legislative branch to work harder to connect the dots. You know, I just got to tell you, too often, you know, and also my measure is 100% renewable portfolio standard for, 100% renewables, which came through this committee as a result of an amendment in appropriations. And all I'm saying is we as a legislative branch would do ourselves a better service in terms of holding the feet accountable, the folks of the advocacy, making sure the information's accurate, trying to coordinate information better among the committees, and do a better job as a branch of government, you know, because I'm sitting here and I'm getting it's the old Lincoln story, which I'm not going to repeat here. You could ask me later, but it's like you hear one argument in the morning and you hear another argument in the afternoon, and we need to connect the dots. And it's just, I just find it a little frustrating, and I just want to share that with you because I just went through this very same thing and got the exact opposite arguments, and now had I read my file and saw Mr. Ting's bill, I would have responded in that way. So I just want to make that point.
Senator Wilk?
I also had the pleasure of sitting through that committee hearing, watching you, and then doing my own bill. It's been a great afternoon.
How'd I do?
Let's do it again as soon as we can. Mr. Assembly Member, I think it's, I represent areas that are actively consulting, spending money, and looking at partnerships actively. And I would really urge you to delay implementation. I hadn't heard the 2017 request. I think 2018 is reasonable. By the time it gets going, I think that's, again, entirely reasonable. I would urge you to accept that amendment.
Mr. Ting, just generally, if we can reply to the Senator, we have the proposal for a 2017 effective date, maybe, or a 2018, I'm sorry. Do we need an effective date? Do you have an argument why we wouldn't have that to accommodate the concerns?
The major issue right now, the only thing that we need to happen immediately is for the Energy Commission, the California Energy Commission, to start doing their work. So I'm very open to 2017 or 2018, happy to obviously continue to work on that after it gets out of committee. I also have the concern for as new CCAs start, not just Marin and Sonoma. I've been an advocate for CCA, but really I know the city of Alameda is looking at it. We have CCAs really up and down the state. Lancaster just started. So again, this is not just a concern for only the current CCAs, but really how do we make sure we have a phase in for as CCA start. So we're really, you know, arguing apples to apples. Obviously, if you've been in business for over 100 years, you're going to have a leg up in terms of your ability to procure green energy. When you're starting in this very, very complicated business day one, you're not going to have that same ability, and you just have one employee with a phone and a computer. Obviously, we want to make sure that those organizations have time to get up to speed. So one, happy to, I'm very open to, and I think we can get there on delaying implementation for this specific body, separate from making sure that the CEC does their work. Two, would also even look at phasing in properly as we have new organizations really come online, how we handle that. So
thank you. Senator McGuire, did you have something else?
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and I promise this will be my last word, Mr. Chair. In one of the items, and had the opportunity to be able to speak with the author earlier today, is potentially looking at some language here that's saying that direct the California Energy Commission to work on implementation immediately as rollout would not happen until January 1, 2018. So we would not actually see implementation until January 1, 2018, but direct the California Energy Commission to be able to start on that implementation, and frankly the planning, I think, is where the Assembly member wants to be able to go immediately, with the understanding that January 1, 2018, all would have to be phased out.
Right. And since we're just discussing this right now, obviously we need to consult with my coalition about 2017, 2018, but again, happy to look at either one. I'm very open.
And I'd be happy to offer a motion of January 1 of 2018.
A separate motion on the bill? We have a motion on the bill. Did you want to take up a separate motion on the bill? But we're just going to take up a motion on the bill itself, and I think it's fair that we have a. Yes. I think it's fair that we work with the author on establishing that date. I think that's a fair. And what's that? So we can't. What we're going to do next is establish a quorum, and we're going to ask our clerk to please call the roll.
Hueso?
Here.
Hueso here. Fuller? Here. Fuller here. Canela? Here. Canela here. Hertzberg? Hertzberg here. Hill? Hill here. Laura? Leyva? Here. Leyva here. McGuire? Here. McGuire here. Morel? Here. Morel here. Pavley? Wolk? Wolk here.
So now we'll entertain a motion on the bill.
So we're going to move the bill that is with the consideration of 2018?
What I'd prefer to do is, since we don't have any obviously amends in front of us, to be able to just obviously pass the bill as is, but you have my commitment that we will work the issue around delaying implementation out.
Right. With
otherwise, then the chair can always ask for it back. Yes.
We want to move the bill as is now with the amendments we accepted, because we have those in print, and the authors promised to work with the committee and to work with Senator McGuire on establishing the effective date, 17 or 18. That's okay. We'll call the vote, Madam Clerk.
Do pass as amended to appropriations. Hueso?
Aye.
Hueso aye. Fuller? Canela? Aye. Canela aye. Hertzberg? Aye. Hertzberg aye. Hill? Aye. Hill aye. Laura? Leyva? Aye. Leyva aye. McGuire? McGuire aye. Morel? Pavley? Wolk?
Aye.
Wolk aye.
Mr. Chair, if I might ask you a question, would it be fair to say that it is the intent of the chair to come up with an implementation date, either 2017 or 2018? That's the will of the committee, or not?
I think at the next committee, the author has promised to iron out that issue, and we'll work with him on that. Mm-hmm.
I need an implementation date to, I did vote yes.
What I would say is, again, I'm not going to commit to 2017 or 2018, but I will commit to one of those two for sure. That you have my word that I will work to get to agreement to delay a year or 2 years.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to the next bill.
Thank you.
We're going to take up, what's that?